Hi everybody, this is Bobby. I'm in the French Quarter of New Orleans. I've been living in this city for the last 11 years. I'm about to leave and I want to make a video about 1 hour long, maybe a little shorter than that, to pay homage to my city. And I would like to focus on the tumultuous part of our history, on the spicy stuff, things that people will remember, and what we have here. In the background is St. Louis Cathedral with Jackson Square. You all see Andrew Jackson there on horseback. I will go there in a little bit, but I want to start off with the beginnings of the city. And that needs to involve a discussion about the river, the Big Muddy, the Mississippi here. So y'all are looking at the Mississippi. I'm going to go a little closer to it. This is important because the flooding that has occurred for the past 2,000 years has created a natural levee here in this area in the French Quarter for those 2,000 years because of the silt being deposited by the river by constant flooding year after year after year. When the snow would melt in places up north, like Mississippi, like Minnesota and Wisconsin and other states up north, that Mississippi was basically draining. All that silt was deposited here, and it's quite a paradox that this city, or not this city, I'm sorry, but this area here, the French Quarter, is the part of the city that is a little bit higher. It doesn't flood even during hurricanes nowadays. It never floods in modern times, specifically because it got flooded by the river back in the olden days. Quite a paradox. But what we have here is the big bridge. It's called Crescent City Connection, that connects the main part of the city over here, downtown New Orleans, with Algiers Point. It's another neighborhood, part of the city of New Orleans over there. And this land was inhabited early on by the Choctaw and the Chapatoulas tribes. They had a trading post very close to here, where you see this building in cream colors and with green awnings. So this was a trading post for those two tribes, the Choctaw and the Chapatoulas. We have a major avenue here in New Orleans called Chapatoulas in their honor, and it's been inhabited by them for about, we estimate, about 1,200 years. So settled by these two Native American tribes around year 800 or so. Anyway, the first Europeans arrived here in 1718. That's the founding of the city as the city of New Orleans that we know today. And it was founded by the French, and they named it in honor of the Duke of Orleans in France. It was the Duke that financed part of this expedition back then. Anyway, I'm going to try to be quiet for just a few minutes because I cannot compete with all this music, but I'm going to start talking again once we get past this. Again, this is St. Louis Cathedral with Jackson Square there in the background. All right, let's make our way there.
I should run away, but like a fool I stay. Hope you see your love for me. I can feel it, even when you're not here. I cannot conceal it. I really love you, honey.
I'll try to make this video in as much as a chronological order as I possibly can, but some of these buildings are not lined up chronologically, of course. The city developed in certain patterns, but then it burned down a couple of times. So buildings from different periods are built next to one another. What we have here is the Pantaba apartments. These are the oldest apartments in the United States, and they were built by Baroness Pantaba in the 1800s and 18 teens. And I said apartment buildings, plural, not singular, because there's one just like it on the other side of the park over there. You see the roof, exactly symmetrical, exactly the same as this one. And the Baroness Almanastra Pantaba was very wealthy, obviously, but also very narcissistic. So she decided to imprint her initials on every single one of these galleries. By the way, here in New Orleans, we call these balconies that have supports, that have columns like this, we call them galleries. But you see there, AP stands for Almanastra Pantaba. You see it on that gallery, you see it on this one, you see it on the next one, and so forth. Very proud woman, and she just wanted to show off, basically, with these initials. I'm going to step into the park here. Again, this is Jackson Square, and it's flanked on both sides by these apartment buildings. What we have here is a live oak tree, some palmetto trees there, and on horseback, coming up here, Andrew Jackson. This is the hero of New Orleans who saved our behinds in the big battle of New Orleans in the War of 1812, which, by the way, happened in year 1815. But what's 3 years between friends, right? Anyway, he had the big battle of New Orleans, which happened in Chalmette, a suburb about 10 miles from here, with the British Army. And the Brits were a little arrogant. They decided on a very cloudy day to wear, on a very gray day, to wear all bright red. That was their uniform, and they decided to march forward in a big line. The Americans were hiding with Andrew Jackson behind bushes. They're all dressed in dark gray and dark green to basically kind of blend in with the landscape. And of course, the Brits were really easy target because of that. And Andrew Jackson won that battle, and that battle meant that the United States won the war with the Brits. This was finished by year 1815, later that year, and he is considered the hero of New Orleans because of that. Controversial figure, of course. I'm not going to get into the history of why he's controversial. I'll just mention this little thing, which is not little, I'm being sarcastic, but very sad thing in our history called the Trail of Tears. Anyway, he was only a major general when he fought this battle with the Brits. Also, I wanted to say this statue is the only one in the South, not in the whole nation, just in the South, where a horse is standing only on 2 legs, on the hind legs, not on all 4. Had he not won that battle with the Brits, we probably would speak with a British accent on our streets in New Orleans today, but instead we speak with a Transylvanian accent. Well, some of us at least. Anyway, this here, St. Louis Cathedral, the oldest cathedral in the South, not in the whole nation, just in the South. Still a pretty big title, and not all of it is original from the early 1700s. The foundation is original, as well as about half of the first floor, up to where the front door ends at the top there. And the second floor, the third floor, and all those steeples were added much later, after a few fires burned down the top of the building. So top part of the building over there, built in the 1820s. Bottom part here, built in the early 1700s. That makes it the oldest, well, at least the bottom part, it makes that the oldest cathedral in the south. I'm going to try to step inside very quickly just for a little view there. It is open. Some really cute dogs here. Go back outside. All right, the cathedral is flanked on both sides by these narrow alleys. This one here is called Pirates Alley. It's because back in the olden days, especially in the early 1700s, 1718 up until about 1762, 1763, the Frenchmen here used to have a lot of duels. A lot of these men were pirates, although not all of them. And a lot of these pirates were very proud men. And they would have duels for almost any reason to save their honor. There's a Pirates Alley Cafe here to commemorate the pirates having duels back in the olden days. Really interesting place here. Oh, they're doing some renovation. Over here, we have a very nice little locally owned bookstore. This is Faulkner Bookstore. And I'm sorry, Faulkner House Books. And they built it here because William Faulkner, the novelist, wrote his very first novel, Soldier's Pay, in this building upstairs there on the second and third floors over there. And now we have a little nice little bookstore here. We're gonna continue on. Again, I'm going to try to focus more on the scandalous part of our history. So I'll just say this. For the early days, there was a very prominent Scotsman here by the name of John Law, who created quite a stir in the city, quite a big scandal. He decided to go to Germany, especially to Bavaria, but other parts of Germany as well, and decided to lie to a lot of Germans and advertise New Orleans as this amazing city with amazing mountainous landscapes, with alpine meadows and really high rocks. Basically described it like the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Well, we're nowhere near Colorado. It's all flat. We're actually, most of New Orleans is below sea level. 80% of the city is below sea level. The French Quarter, as well as the Garden District, are that little tiny strip of land in the city that is above sea level. Again, because of all that silt that's been deposited over the millennia. And here on this spot, we are actually 3 feet above sea level. So this never floods. The rest of the city floods. This one never does. We are on Royal Street. Y'all can see the French flag there. Again, to pay respect to the early French colonists that settled the city in 1718. Our heritage is still very French. And Royal Street is known for having a lot of these bands that play sometimes really impromptu, really good bands, some of them. I want to talk a little bit about the architecture of the French Quarter. You see a lot of this Creole architecture, it's called, with a lot of wrought iron. We localize everything in New Orleans as far as names go. It's not really Creole. It was brought over by the Spaniards to New Orleans in they started getting here by 1762. And they brought this architecture with them from the south of Spain, from the provinces of Andalusia and Extremadura. But it was brought over to Spain actually way earlier than that. It was brought over to Spain by the Moroccans, by the Moorish invaders, by the Arabs. So really at its core, it's Arabic architecture, not Creole at all. But again, we localize everything and we call it Creole. What we have here is the back side of St. Louis Cathedral. That statue over there projects onto the face of the church at night. There's a light there that shines on the statue. The shadow covers almost the entire face of the church, and we call it here Touchdown Jesus, colloquially. We make fun of everything here. We're a little sacrilegious, a little funny, a little disrespectful, but that's New Orleans. It's a city with a lot of personality. Here we have Pat Antoine Alley, and I want to talk about the Spaniards here in this alley. So the Spaniards got here in 1762. This was about 4 decades after the French started the city. And the French lost New Orleans and actually all of Louisiana province to the Spaniards because they had been fighting all these wars in Europe and also the North American war called the French and Indian War. And the French kept doing what they used to do back in those days, at least. What they used to do best, which was losing. They kept losing all these wars. They had to pay all these war reparation payments. They didn't have the money, and in order to get it, they were forced to sell New Orleans and all of Louisiana to Spain. Well, the King of Spain in 1762 was not quite ready. He only sent a small ship with only 11 soldiers on board. They got here in the square where you see the American flag today. It's Jackson Square today, but back then it was called Place des Armes, or in Spanish, Plaza de las Armas. Those 11 Spanish soldiers got on a big podium, probably close to where the statue, the Jackson statue is today. And from there, he started yelling at all the French people gathered around here. He yelled at them, listen up everybody, you're no longer French, you're Spanish now, abide by our rules. Well, everything was hunky-dory initially because the French people just kind of shrugged and said, as long as you let us have a party and drink and eat greasy, delicious food, call us whatever you want to call us, French, Spanish, we're good. Except for 6 young, brave Frenchmen who saw this as a big shame. They couldn't tolerate it. About a week later, they had a fight with the 11 Spanish soldiers in a dark alley. They caught them by surprise, and guess what? For once, the French won. They disarmed the 11 Spanish soldiers who got back onto their ship and sailed back to Spain. And those soldiers reported to their king. Hola, king, escuche, rey. That little colony you had over in America, Nuevo Orleans, yeah, we kind of lost it. Oops, lo siento. We're really sorry. So the King of Spain got serious this next time. It took him about 1.5 years to get serious about it, but 1.5 years later, by now year 1764, he sent a whole big armada, 10 big ships filled with men armed to their teeth, and also sent their general here, the Spanish general by the name of Alejandro O'Reilly. Very Spanish name, O'Reilly, right? Well, it turns out O'Reilly was an Irishman. He had figured a few years before that Ireland could not pay as good money as Spain could at the time, so he went where the money was. He jumped ship. He went to Spain. And Don Alejandro O'Reilly gets here. He wanted to flex his muscle, wanted to look tough, and did a little espionage, found out who these 6 young French revolutionaries were from 1.5 years before. And to prove a point, got them there in the middle of the square. Got these big wooden wheels about this tall and hooked them onto horse-drawn carts, dragged those wheels over these 6 young French men until every single bone in their bodies was broken. Oh, they were still alive at the end, in agonizing pain, of course. And then he dragged them to the front steps of the church. Back then, the front of the cathedral, the front of the church, was actually here on this side. They did a few modifications in later decades, but the front steps right here, I'm sorry. And told the entire French well, first of all, decapitated all 6 young French men right here by the church. Told the entire French community gathered around, if you as much as touch their bodies, I'll cut your heads off too. I want for them to basically rot here in front of the church for everybody to see what it means to break my rule. I'm your leader now. Pay attention and honor only to me. Well, the priest over here at the church, the French priest, Père Antoine Dagobert, and this alley is actually named in his honor. It's called Père Antoine Alley. The priest begged and pleaded with the general. General, por favor, señor, s'il vous plaît, monsieur. Please, sir, I know you're upset about this little revolution we had a year and a half ago, but look, time has passed. We're all really afraid of you. We're obedient. We're not gonna start any new funky revolutions. Please allow me to bury these 6 young French men with the proper Catholic burial. Surely you can understand as a good Catholic yourself. Well, the general wouldn't listen. General O'Reilly told the priest the same thing. Priest, touch these bodies, I'll kill you too. The priest had nothing else to do but prayed and prayed fervently for a miracle. And his miracle came forth, just a week later in the form of a hurricane. Something that the Spaniards had not yet seen. So in fear, they all waited inside their barracks, 3 blocks in that direction. We have a street called Barracks Street, where the barracks actually were, and waited there for the hurricane to pass. Well, the French had been living with hurricanes for 42, 43 years by now. No big deal to them. Oh, small wind, small rain, we can handle this, they decided. So, that means while the hurricane was churning above us, the entire French community, together with their priest, unstrapped those bodies from the church here, threw them in a broken down cart, and decided to go give them a funeral at the cemetery. Their procession stopped right here at the beginning, and here next to these steps, the priest sang Kyrie eleison to pay extra respect for their courage. And then they continued, they carried on with the funeral a few blocks away. 2 days later, 3 days later, the hurricane had passed. The Spaniards came outside of their barracks. They saw that the bodies were missing. The Spanish general, Alejandro O'Reilly, got in touch with the priest, started questioning him, and the priest decided to be honest and told him the truth. Well, surprise, surprise, the general did not kill the priest. He forgave him. He forgave the entire French community. I guess he just wanted to see some moxie, some courage here in the community. He forgave everybody. Not only that, the Spanish king promoted that same general only 1 year later to become the first Spanish governor of Louisiana. And to this day, Governor Alejandro O'Reilly is known as Louisiana's best governor, most efficient, most benevolent, most beloved out of the really, really rough man that he started off with in the early days. Complete change of heart. So this was one of the early scandals of New Orleans. Over here, guys, unrelated to any of this, over here we have the iconic blue dog of New Orleans. You see a lot of these blue dogs on these paintings and sculptures. And in recent years, they start painting them in other colors. You can see it's red right here. But initially, they were all blue. And the painter, George Rodrigue, painted these blue dogs basically to pay respect to a legend, Cajun legend from the swamp. This represents the Rougarou, the Cajun werewolf. It's a really cute werewolf, in my opinion. These blue dogs are really, really cute werewolves. Anyway, I'm going to go away from Royal Street for a little bit. We're gonna go pass through Bourbon. And I want to talk a little bit about the raunchiness of Bourbon today, but also back in the olden days. And then we'll talk about other parts of our history. But I'm passing by Bourbon Orleans Hotel, a really nice, luxurious hotel, just half a block away from Bourbon. Bourbon started getting into the shape it is today, with all the bars and strip clubs and sex work, prostitution, all of that. It started taking the shape in the 1820s, when the famous and infamous Storyville, the big red light district of New Orleans, known throughout all of the United States, when they had to close their doors. Storyville used to be in that direction, about 5 blocks, maybe 6 blocks from here. Unfortunately, it's just a sad, empty parking lot today. All those big, beautiful buildings that had been once very luxurious brothels had been torn down. They were built in the 1890s and 1900s and lasted only for about 3 decades. Torn down 1920s and 1930s. So not all of it, but a lot of that stuff moved here to Bourbon Street. If not all the prostitution, at least a lot of the drinking. Anyway, we are on Bourbon Street here, and you can see it's a very colorful avenue. It's usually more packed with people. It's only 2 o'clock in the afternoon right now, so not very animated yet, but some of the musicians are starting to play already. And right here on this side, on the left hand side, we have Cornet. At Cornet, Louis Armstrong, as a little 8-year-old boy, picked up his very first musical instrument. It was a cornet, and that's why they call this place the Cornet today. I'm going to go across the street so you guys can see it from that angle. Preservation Hall, just a few steps in that direction here. Anyway, we see the cornet there. And as I'm walking away from it, I want to tell you all about Louis Armstrong. So back then, this building, the Cornet today, used to be a storage space for wood used for burning, for heat, and also for coal. A Jewish family owned the building. They had a little broken down cart. They were delivering coal from that cart and basically passing by in front of people's houses in different neighborhoods here and yelling, "We've got coal, we've got coal." People would come outside of their homes and purchase the coal right there on the spot in front of their homes. This was not the most efficient way to do it, because just them yelling, well, they were not that loud. So they hired Louis Armstrong, a little boy, 8 years old, just simply to deliver coal. They had a little dusty cornet in a corner of that room upstairs, and he randomly picked it up and learned how to play it within days. He had such great talent. And that was his very first instrument that he touched in his life. And they kept him on. He practiced on that little cornet because that was the new siren, basically. He would play that cornet from that coal cart. That was to let people know, okay, coal is coming in front of your house. Come outside to purchase it. What we have here coming up on the right is the Sultan Massacre House. I have a whole story about this in another video that I posted about a year ago. It's about, I don't know, 20 minutes long if I remember right. I'll be brief on this one about this. I'll just say 33 people were butchered up and killed. Well, first of all killed and then butchered up into small pieces in this building back in the 1830s. And the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Sultan, used to live here. What I want to show you here are tiles that the Kingdom of Spain gave us about 5 decades ago to commemorate the Spanish heritage that New Orleans has. So streets here in New Orleans have signs in 3 languages. What you see here, Dauphine Street in big letters. Above, Rue Dauphine in French, and Camino de Bayona on this side in Spanish. That was the Spanish name for the street. All right, I'm going to walk away from this area as well. We're gonna go to Louis Armstrong Park, and I want to tell you about jazz and the connection jazz had with the X-Men of New Orleans and with the Sicilian American community at the turn of the century here. But before we get there, just wanted to point out a few things. Here on this side, we have a bar that has some Romeo spikes. I have yet another video about Romeo spikes as well. I'll just say this. They're called Romeo spikes because in the olden days, concerned fathers used to install those there with the only purpose of deterring eager teenage Romeos from climbing up to basically, let's say, to discuss philosophy with their girlfriends in the middle of the night. These spikes would deter most of these teenage Romeos, but not quite everybody. So sometimes some of these teenage Romeos would climb down as Juliets because they'd catch some of their very treasured jewels on those spikes. All right, so we're walking towards Louis Armstrong Park. Y'all can see the gate of the park there. It's a modern gate. And next to the park, we used to have we still have Congo Square, but it was larger back in the olden days. And it was a place for recent Haitian immigrants in the early 1800s to congregate and to dance, to have a party on a Sunday, and to practice voodoo. They brought voodoo with them from Haiti. Now, voodoo comes originally not from Haiti, but actually from Western African places. The modern, what is today the modern countries of Nigeria, Niger, Benin, Togo, Senegal, Burkina Faso. And they brought it from Haiti here because there was a major revolution in Haiti in year 1804. And in that revolution, the half of the population that started the revolution lost. So they came here to New Orleans as refugees because we're still kind of on the fringes of the Caribbean. They settled here, they brought voodoo with them, but New Orleans voodoo is actually a syncretic religion. What I mean by that is a mix of two religions. It's a mix of Western African voodoo with a lot of black magic influences, with voodoo dolls and gris-gris knickknacks, offerings that you leave for the Loa gods, for them to intercess with you to the Bondi, the good God, in Creole French. And it's usually for good prayer, to bring somebody harmony in their family, to have somebody fall in love with you, like love potions and spells, to get you a better job, a better career. Very rarely is voodoo used for black magic purposes. All that stuff that a lot of people see in movies with voodoo witches ripping arms and legs of dolls that represent somebody you want to harm. Well, a lot of that is exaggerated. By the way, since we're talking about voodoo, we are passing by the house where Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo queen of New Orleans, used to live. And I'll go across the street so y'all can see it a little bit better from that angle. But she used to live in this house, one of the two houses that she used to live here in New Orleans. She was the most famous witch of New Orleans, was very prominent in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. Anyway, voodoo usually used for good because voodoo witches know that voodoo is karmic. It's based on karma. A witch knows that if she willingly curses somebody who does not deserve that curse will eventually come back to her, the witch, to bite her in her behind. So only when she's 100% sure that that person is, hi Stella, this is one of my colleagues.
Hi.
I'm making a little video for YouTube.
You go? Yeah, I'll make sure they take our jobs.
Yeah. See you. That was one of my colleagues. I'm a tour guide, as you probably know from some of my other videos, and that's how I know all of this history. I'm passionate about history, and especially about the history of New Orleans. And I've been a tour guide for 7 years now, so it's bittersweet for me to leave the city. Anyway, back to voodoo. So only when a witch is 100% sure that a person deserves that curse, only then will she have the courage to curse that person, to rip that arm or that leg of that doll that represents the targeted person. Anyway, voodoo used to be practiced here in this part of the park. This is still called Congo Square. It's still practiced to a small degree today. And they had to adapt. Those Haitian immigrants, the voodoo practitioners, they had to adapt because it was very scary to the French and Spanish white population here. So imagine you are a hardcore Catholic going to Sunday Mass in the church I showed you a few minutes ago in St. Louis Cathedral, and we're only 4 blocks away from that. You get out of the cathedral, out of the church after the Mass was over, and you'd hear all these wild African drum beats from here, from Congo Square. This is how they practice voodoo, especially on Sunday, at the really loud beats of African drums. And a lot of them would dance with big fat snakes coiled around their necks, half naked. So to the white population here, this was very scary. Nothing scary about it in reality. The snake represents fertility and good luck and health. But it looked scary to the white settlers here. So they basically came up with a rule: you either got Catholic or you got out. So anyone who practiced voodoo decided to incorporate a lot of these Catholic saints and Catholic practices and paintings into voodoo. That's why it's a syncretic religion, a mix. So today, well, even back then, when they adapted very quickly, a person who practices voodoo could go into the Catholic Church and pray to the Christian God in the name of Jesus Christ, with statues of Mother Mary right in front of them, and rosary beads in one hand and voodoo dolls in the other hand. And they pray at the same time to these law gods and to the Christian God, and in the name of all the saints and Mother Mary, and in the name of Jesus Christ especially. So it's a mixed religion. What we have there, guys, is the Mahalia Jackson Theater for the Performing Arts. A lot of music here, a lot of really rich heritage when it comes to culture and music. Nice statue here. So we talked about Louis Armstrong. He's not the only one, but he's one of the most prominent jazz musicians to be coming out of New Orleans. But I'm gonna go a little bit before that. So jazz was born around the turn of the century. Let's say year 1900, although it came in phases. It didn't occur all at once one year, but around the year 1900. And for the first 19 years, the first 20 years or so, it had not been popular yet. It was not for the masses early on. You could only hear jazz initially in dirty dungeons and brothels, but it became popular all of a sudden by year 1920 and after. The Roaring 20s, the age of jazz. And how is this? Well, this is yet another scandal of New Orleans. So I want to talk about the Axeman of New Orleans on this occasion. The guy was the terror of New Orleans. He is a character in that TV show called American Horror Story. Well, that is actually inspired by true events. There was a person here in New Orleans who, for 2 years, 1918 and 1919, killed people in 7 different spots throughout the city, always in the middle of the night, always severing their heads with his big axe, leaving a note in the pocket of the victim saying, "I'm the axe man and I very proudly did this." All of these murders culminated with a really creepy classified that the Axeman sent. The Axeman sent this classified to the local Times-Picayune newspaper. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but it basically said this: "I'm the Axeman, I'm invisible, I'll always stay so, and because of it, you'll never be able to catch me. However, New Orleanians, I'm not a human, but I'm a demon from the hottest pits in hell. And as long as you disobey me, if you disobey me, you'll run that risk of tasting that tantalizing taste of my axe. But, New Orleanians, I'm also a very reasonable demon. I'm a big impassioned fan of a genre of music which you have not fully yet tasted, but I believe you will very soon. It's called jazz. New Orleanians, humble mortals, if you read this classified in the paper, and if you see it, take heed. If you dance the jazz, if you listen to jazz, if you do anything involving jazz during the next Mardi Gras season coming up in the spring of 1920, in my infinite mercy and wisdom, I'll spare your life. I'll pass over you and leave you alone." Well, everybody was so creeped out that next spring, during that next Mardi Gras season in year 1920, you better believe everybody was all of a sudden listening to jazz. And this is, at least in part, this is what made jazz popular. Now, the guy left one more clue besides the jazz connection. He only killed Italian Americans, specifically Sicilian Italian Americans. So we don't know for sure if he was maybe an Italian himself. Hold on, I'm going to try to cross the street here if any one of these will allow me without killing me. All right. So we don't know to this day if the guy was maybe a Sicilian himself, part of the Black Hand, part of the early Mafia, trying to perhaps intimidate his competition. A few of these Sicilians were jazz musicians, but they were some of the more minor ones. Jazz was born in the black community in New Orleans, not the Sicilian community, but a few Sicilians took it up. So maybe he was a jazz musician from the Sicilian community trying to, I don't know, put his competition down, kill it off. Or perhaps he just hated Sicilians. He maybe just hated Italian Americans and was racist, xenophobic like that. Targeted this Sicilian population. We don't know. But we do know this. He only killed Sicilian Italian Americans, and he left that creepy classified in the paper about jazz. Whoever this person was actually kept his promise, because after those initial murders for the first 2 years, and after that classified in the paper, he did not decapitate anyone else. Maybe he died, maybe he killed himself, maybe somebody killed him, or maybe he was just satisfied, simply satisfied that jazz became popular very quickly. We don't know. To this day, we have no more clues other than these few clues, and they're not very strong, to be honest. All right, I'm walking more into the residential part of the French Quarter, and I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you all about yellow fever. So yellow fever shaped our history, shaped our culture in very profound ways, left a big impact, a sad impact. I have a really interesting story. I believe it's interesting of how yellow fever developed. So yellow fever was present here when the first Europeans got here by year 1718, and it was really not bad. In the 1700s, we had yellow fever epidemics, but they were maybe once every 10 years on average, and they only claimed the lives of a handful of people, which was bad enough, but again, not nearly to the proportions that it was later on in more modern times in the 1800s. It got much worse in the 1800s. Well, how is that? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it really does if you think of it. It has to do with architecture of all things. So I just happened to see this brick house here. Initially, all the houses in the French Quarter were built out of wood, cypress wood. And later on, they were built out of brick, like you see here. Cypress wood, initially, because we have cypress trees that are abundant in all of these swamps around New Orleans. So back in those early days, if you knew how to swing an axe, if you knew how to cut a tree, and if you knew how to put a few logs on top of each other, you pretty much got yourself a free house. Well, it was also the preferred wood because it's very dense, it's very resistant to water. New Orleans gets an average of 75 inches of rain annually. It's the wettest major American city. So all of that rain creates humidity in the air, and most wood does not resist all of that. Most wood develops very quickly, develops all this rot and black mold on it, but not cypress wood. It's very dense, very porous, and it has all these resins inside. While the flip side of the coin is, being that it's so dense with all those resins inside, it makes it a very flammable type of wood. So these houses tended to burn down left and right. No major fire though up until year 1788. That year, about half of the city burned down. We decided to rebuild. 6 years later, 1793. By the way, again, French heritage here. We have a sign in both English. Well, we have English there, French here. But anyway, so 6 years later, 1794, the other half of the city burns down. So the Spanish authorities at the time decided enough with the stupid fires. They put in 2 laws. Law number 1, everybody had to build their houses out of brick this time, so they would no longer be so flammable. Number 2, everybody had to build a cistern, a tank about this tall, round like this, and build it just a few feet away from their houses, and keep it filled with water at all times, just in case of another fire. I personally think that that was a little bit of an overkill. The new houses being built out of brick was enough to stop the risk of a fire. But they didn't want to take any chances, so they put in the law about these tanks filled with water. Well, guess what? All of that stagnating water brought in mosquitoes, which were the carriers of yellow fever. We did not know about this at the time. We did not know that the virus that caused yellow fever was carried by these mosquitoes. We were at a complete loss trying to fight yellow fever. We thought we got it actually from corpses, which was not right. We just didn't have the science. So after 1794, in the 1800s, yellow fever epidemics spiked. They started happening every 3 years on average, and they claimed many lives every epidemic. The worst one was in 1783, another brick building here. So this was built, these buildings out of brick were built out of that legacy, out of that law that the Spaniards put into place in 1794. Anyway, biggest epidemic, 1853, when 1/3 of our population died within just a couple of months that summer. 1/3. That's not good at all. And they died in really horrific conditions. First of all, you would get this jaundiced skin, yellow, sickly looking skin all over your body. The skin would crack every few inches apart, would ooze with yellow pus. You'd get yellow pus in your eyes as well. You'd start coughing blood mixed in with yellow pus. And in this sad cocktail, you could also cough out little chunks of your internal organs, especially chunks of your liver. When you coughed up enough of your liver, of course you would die because you no longer had a liver. It was outside your body, basically. You would die in excruciating agony. And at least that year in 1753, we were so overwhelmed, they started dumping bodies right by their front doors in many of these places in the French Quarter here. And of course, there would be collectors hired by the authorities to come and collect these bodies. They dumped them outside the city in that direction, about 3 miles away from here, in a common burial ground. Sometimes they would not collect them very quickly because they got overwhelmed. They would be here for a few days, and those that did not get collected right away, they would swell and swell and swell so much they would literally explode from that pile. So with all that, I am really happy we live in modern times. I am so thankful for modern medicine. A lot of people romanticize the past. Oh, the good old days, the good old days. No, I'll take year 2023 anytime over 1853. Anytime. All right, we are on a quieter street in the French Quarter. I'm going to go over to Cosimo. This is a neighborhood bar. I'm not gonna step inside, just wanted to show you how a neighborhood bar looks here. That steeple there with the cross that's kind of tilted very badly. That's in Tremé neighborhood. Tremé, the neighborhood next door over, is the birthplace of jazz. That's where Louis Armstrong and many other important jazz names from New Orleans hail from that neighborhood. All right, Cosimo bar, named in honor of yet another jazz musician here in New Orleans. So jazz, big thing here, as most of y'all probably know already. All right, I'm going to walk by the Madame Lowry house. I'll start talking about it before we get there. But Madame Lowry, evil woman, who for 3 years, 1832 through 1835, tortured her many slaves in her house. She almost got caught. The slaves were liberated, some of them were dead by the time some firemen got there. Anyway, she got away at the last minute, moved to New York, continued her career of torture for the next month there, and then escaped from New York City as well, only to move to Paris, France, where she continued that illustrious career, and I'm being sarcastic here, where she continued her career there for the next 27 years. Never caught, not in Paris, not in New York, not in New Orleans here. She did really horrific things. I don't want to get into the details. I have another video about this. It's called, I think I titled it, The Lowry House of New Orleans. I posted it about a year ago, I want to say. And look how beautiful these streets are. Again, some Creole architecture here, mixed in with single gallery houses, double gallery houses. A lot of greenery here. These trees with smooth bark, actually no bark, just the smooth edges here. These are called crepe myrtles. They're my favorite tree in the world. I will miss this, all of this so much, but I gotta leave New Orleans. I gotta make better money. The tour guiding job that I've had, this has been the best job I've had in my life. It really feeds my soul, but not my pocket, not that well. And I want to start a family, and I don't think I could support one on a tour guide salary. So on to different things. All right, we're crossing Bourbon again, but this is the residential side of Bourbon, so very quiet on this side. Not so quiet, just a few blocks in that direction. Where you see the flags starting to come up, that's more of the party side of that. Madame Laurie's house is coming up. It's the gray big building with 3 floors and the little tower at the top. They're on the right hand side. As we're passing, by here, this white building, this used to be a stable for horses back in the olden days. They turned it into a luxury condominium complex. So we repurposed everything here. They did a really, really good job. I'll go a little closer. An oasis of greenery. Again, more of those Spanish tiles. This street here is Governor Nichols in English, but Calle de Hospital in Spanish. Just because a couple of miles away from here to the north on this street, there used to be a small hospital at one point. Again, Madame Laurie's house here, the gray one coming up on the right. To this day, this is the largest single family home in the entire French Quarter. Not in the whole city, just in the French Quarter. Now, whether anyone who's watching this video believes in ghosts or not, that's up to y'all. But this house, at least it's purported to be the most haunted house in all of the United States, especially at night. People claim to feel things and see things, paranormal activity, especially around that window on the 3rd floor, the one that's bricked in. All right, we're gonna walk away from this evil house. I'll just say this, the house has been many things, many businesses over the decades. And it's been a furniture store, school for girls, school for boys, a museum at one point, well, museum of torture. At another point, it used to be nice courtyard there. At another point, it used to be a bar, actually a bar on a couple of occasions. Every single business that house used to be, it went bankrupt within a year. So people say it's cursed because of that. That's a sign that it's cursed. I mean, how difficult, actually nearly impossible, for a bar in New Orleans to go bankrupt. Well, that house did. So people say, ah, see, it's got to be cursed. All right. This person has to park right in front of me as I'm passing by. That's good. All right, here on the left, we have the Ursuline Convent. It's a museum today. It used to be a convent for Ursuline Catholic nuns in the early days of the city. This is the chapel part of it. and the convent will come right after this. It's a creepy building. To this day, the nuns, the personnel there, refuse to take anyone up to the third floor. And a lot of locals say that, well, maybe that's because perhaps the museum slash convent are using their attic, the third floor, as a prison for vampires captured in France by the French authorities in the early 1700s and shipped over here because no one in France knew how to kill them. They could easily capture them, they just didn't know how to kill them, and the King of France didn't want to become unpopular, so he sent them over here. That's one of the legends in the city. How accurate the actual history is, nobody knows exactly, but at least that's the legend on the streets, the urban legend here. This house over here, this is the Kai Beauregard house. General Beauregard used to live in this house. He was actually from New Orleans. He is known as the man who shot the first shot of the Civil War at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. And he lived in this house. All right. Okay. Wow. A lot of cars today. All right. This burgundy red building, or peach colored building, whatever that color is, the building with 3.5 floors on the left, the one with the flags, that is Hotel Villa Convento today. But back in the olden days, before the Civil War, it was known as the House of the Rising Sun. That was the actual official name, and it was a brothel. That song that Eric Burden and the Animals were singing about, in that song they were singing about a brothel. They were singing about this building here, the House of the Rising Sun. This is a little view of the courtyard of the Beauregard Kai house. So typical Spanish courtyard. The Spaniards wanted to have all these fountains in their courtyards and be surrounded by walls like this, to basically with entrances like this gate here, to have air flowing through them and water cooling that air. In a hot, humid climate like this, you needed that. All right, so this is the Ursuline Convent once again, the chapel there and the museum here. Once again, the third floor is said by many, as part of this legend at least, is said by many to be a prison for vampires from France from about 280, 290 years ago. This building here with the flags on the left, this is my favorite hotel in all of New Orleans. A nice luxury boutique hotel, very mellow, very comfortable. But back in the olden days, during the Civil War, for only 2.5 years, this functioned as the main hospital in New Orleans. And a lot of amputations took place here in this building. Amputations done mostly using saws, some of them rusty saws, right inside this building. Some of them really rusty saws without anesthesia. So imagine the pain, the agony actually. Imagine the fear, the panic. After that, the doctor would come with a big red hot frying pan from the stove, hold it there to cauterize the wound. Hold it there for a few seconds. Once again, I am so thankful for modern medicine and for not having so many wars as we used to in the past. Y'all see the steeple of the St. Louis Cathedral over there. I am not getting a break today with all these motorcycles making big sounds and noises, and trucks and diesel semis and Oh my goodness. All right. All right, coming up on the right, I will show you all a really nice Spanish courtyard. Again, we have many of these, about 100, just in the French Quarter. They're really beautiful, and they kept you cooler than it would have been, than you would have been otherwise without these. Whoops. There we go. Beautiful Spanish courtyard. You can see the little water fountain over there. All right. Here, some Italian, Sicilian names. And again, because 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, the first 3, maybe 4 decades after the Civil War ended, there was a big influx of Sicilian Italians who came to New Orleans. It's because the South was financially ruined. Property values were at their bottom here in New Orleans, and they took advantage of the cheap buildings, and they came here in droves, bought up a bunch of these buildings. So for those few decades, 3 decades or so, New Orleans was actually known as Little Palermo, or the Palermo of America. About half of the population at one point used to be Sicilian here. And if you remember, y'all, I told you about the story of the Axeman. We think he was either a Sicilian himself, or maybe he hated Sicilians to have left that creepy classified in the paper. This house here that's under renovation has a really funky name. It's called the Madame John's Legacy House. And it's a museum of pottery and furniture. Closed to the public because of the renovation, but featured heavily in a little movie called Interview with a Vampire. Vampire Lestat, I mean, and Vampire, what's the other name? Louis. The 2 main vampires there had this as their second home after they deliberately burned down their first plantation home. And over here, this is the facade of the Michelson's house, featured in a TV show about vampires called The Originals. So some more modern history here. Some more of those Romeo spikes that I talked about half an hour ago. You see some of these here at the top of the columns. Across the street, Cornstalk Fence Hotel. Named that obviously because of the fence that you see in front of it. And the guy who built the fence because he married a lady from Iowa who was missing her cornfields in the Midwest. Well, we cannot grow corn here. The climate is too harsh, too hot in New Orleans for it. So he said, honey, I will give you corn in the form of a fence. How romantic. Not really. How weird. Romantic, I guess, a little bit as well. More of that Creole architecture that New Orleans is known for so well on both sides of the street here. And this building here on the right with all the flags, this is actually the most photographed building in the Southeast. Because of the flags, because of all those statues, because of the wrought iron galleries. the gorgeous architecture. All right, I will turn around to show you again the most photographed building in the South. This is quintessential New Orleans, quintessential French Quarter in New Orleans. All right, this is the last standing school in the French Quarter. It's a neighborhood that has more of the elderly people living in it. People who no longer have kids that are school age, at least. And they're actually going to close it down. They're turning it, next year, they're going to turn it into a luxury condo. So it's kind of sad to see the very last school in the French Quarter go away. But 3 people y'all might have heard of went to school here, not at the same time, just very different eras. One of them, Truman Capote, the author of a novel called Breakfast at Tiffany's. It was turned into a movie later on. Another person, the infamous Lee Harvey Oswald, the alleged assassin of JFK. And finally, in more modern times, just for only a few months, I've been told that also Ellen DeGeneres, the comedian, went to school here. So that's the school. Here on this side, on the left, at the corner, you all see the oldest continuously running bar in the United States. It's called the Lafitte Blacksmith Shop. It's one of only 3 buildings in the French Quarter that has survived both of those devastating fires that I told you about before. And it survived those fires not because it's a big, impressive, beautiful building. I mean, it's charming, don't get me wrong, but it's not majestic. It survived the fires because of what it had inside. And I'm talking about alcohol. The people of New Orleans formed bucket brigades all the way from the river over there, 4 blocks away. A long line of people, all these folks, passing buckets from one to the other to save their bar. You know what? Forget about my house, let it burn. Forget about my cow and my pig and my horse and the city hall. I don't care about any of that. I just need a place to drink. Yay, New Orleans, only here. And I'll step inside very quickly to keep the ambiance, the authenticity. They don't have any light bulbs. It's all candlelit. So you see a lot of candles. They're not, they don't have any flames yet because, well, it's, how you doing? They don't have any flames because it's daytime, but they have a piano here and a little statue in the back. It's a somewhat of a romantic statue. Statue of a couple of people hugging each other naked. Well, one of them, he died of yellow fever in that epidemic I told you all before, 1853. And she was hugging his corpse in the hope that she'd get yellow fever from him so she could get to paradise together with him. What we didn't know at the time is that you did not get yellow fever from by touch. You got it from mosquito bites. She survived. The cops found her like that, and we decided this is so interesting, let's make a statue out of it. All right, in this building here with the flag there, on the 2nd floor where you see the flag, used to live a gentleman by the name of Tennessee Williams, the famous playwright. And he did not write any major plays in this building, but he got inspired in this building. The guy was famous / infamous for his grouchy temper and for being a big drunk. He used to get drunk at Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. And back then, Bourbon Street here used to have a streetcar running. We had streetcar tracks in the middle. The streetcar would start coming here about 5 o'clock, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning to take people to work. Well, that's metal wheels on metal rails. It made a big noise. it would wake him up, and he would go. He would come out of the bedroom to the balcony here and throw empty beer bottles at the streetcar and cuss at it. Well, that streetcar was his inspiration to write a little play later on in another place. He wrote a play called Streetcar Named Desire. Again, he did not write it here, but he was inspired here to write it. The history of New Orleans is so fascinating. One last thing I'll say, and then I'll cut it out. This building here is the oldest continuously running bar in the United States. And I said continuously, an important word, because there are a couple of bars up in New England. They're a little older than this one, by about 20 years, each one of them. But those bars in New England had to close down during this little thing in our history called the Prohibition. When the Prohibition knocked on our doors, we decided, we're New Orleans, we're not going to observe this, forget about it. They put a big banner on the rooftop that said, big print, this is a blacksmith shop. Even the cops knew that this was a lie. Even they would go inside the bar to partake into all the alcohol we had to offer during the Prohibition. So it never closed. 288 years old this year in the running, and oldest continuously running bar in the United States. All right, I will end here, guys. Y'all, thank you so much for watching. This is Bobby. I wanted to do a video about the city that's been my home for the past 11 years. It's bittersweet for me that I have to leave. I have really good memories here, a lot of friends. Bitter because I'm leaving all of this behind. Sweet because I like new horizons, I like adventure. I will forever keep New Orleans in my heart, and I'll come back to visit for the rest of my life. I don't know how often, but I'll come back and visit. Anyway, we're in the French Quarter of New Orleans, the city, my city, for the last 11 years. Thank you all so much for watching. See you next time.